Hello, everybody. I hope you are fine. This is Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre symbolism. Of course, we have so many important symbols in this very rich and complicated Victorian text. We have the symbols of fire and ice. We have the symbol of the red room. We have the symbol of the moonlight. We have the symbol of birds. In addition to other minor symbols. However, today we are going to discuss the most important symbols in the novel. Let's start by the symbol of the red room, which affected Jane's childhood, for it's remembered as a very painful and traumatic experience to which Jane is exposed. This symbol of the red room is so much related to the image of fire and ice because the servants, Bessie and Abbott, took out the candles out of the room, and the heat inside this room was not working because this room is deserted, so that Jane spent her night in complete cold or ice, which is symbolically implying the lack of affection between her and her aunt Reed. However, the fire was there inside Jane's character in her rebellion against the injustice she is suffering from, and her mistreatment at the hands of Mrs. Reed. The red room can be viewed also as a symbol of what Jane must overcome in her struggles to find freedom, happiness, and a sense of belonging. In the red room, Jane experiences the sense of exile, الإحساس بالمنفى, and imprisonment, الحبس, or lack of freedom. Although Jane is eventually في النهاية freed from the room or comes out of the room, yet she continues to be socially ostracized, financially trapped, or financially dependent and excluded, or kept away from love. Her sense of independence and her freedom of self-expression are constantly or continuously threatened or exposed to danger. The red room's importance as a symbol continues throughout the novel. The experience of the red room is a symbol of social injustice and class discrimination, because Aunt or Mrs. Reed imprisons Jane out of hatred because Jane is very poor and pauper or dependent on her. Um, the red room is a symbol of the memory, because whenever Jane makes a connection between her current situation later on in the novel and her first feeling of being ridiculed, تمت السخرية منها. Thus, she recalls the room, or she remembers that room when she is humiliated, اتهانت at Lowood School. She also thinks of the room on the night that she decides to leave Thornfield after Rochester has tried to convince her to become an undignified mistress. The second important symbol, which is closely intertwined with the red room, is the fire versus ice. Fire and ice appear throughout the novel. The former, or the first one, which refers to fire, represents Jane's passion, anger, الغضب, and spirit, while the latter, or the second one, which refers to ice, symbolizes the oppressive forces, قوى الظلم, trying to extinguish Jane's vitality اللي بتحاول تطفي الحيوية في شخصية جين. Fire is also a metaphor for Jane because Jane has a fiery disposition and an angry character, as the narrative repeatedly associates Jane with the images of fire, brightness, السطوع, and warmth, الدفء. In chapter 4, Jean likens or compares her mind to a ridge of lightened heat, المدفأة المضاءة, alive, glancing, devouring, glancing بتتلألأ, devouring بتلتهم, زي النار بتلتهم ما حولها. We can recognize Jane's kindred spirit, يعني روحها مشتعلة, شخصيتها نارية, by their similar links to fire. Thus we read of Rochester's flaming and flashing eyes. مين برضو اللي شخصيته مرتبطة بالفاير؟ شخصية إدوارد روشستر. اتوصفت عينيه إنها عينين ملتهبة، بمعنى إنها كأنها بتشع نار. After he has been blinded, his face is compared to a lamp quenched. بعد ما أصبح ضرير، عينيه أو وشه اتشبه إن هو كان مصباح واتطفى. waiting to be relit، في انتظار إعادة إضاءته مرة أخرى. برضو ال images of fire يعني كانت at the beginning of the novel related to the fire of affection or the fire of love, as we have seen in the scene in which Mrs. Reed is gathering or collecting in the form of cluster, collecting her children around her with fire lit in order to exchange her love and affection for them, while Jane suffers from extreme cold, which means lack of fire or lack of warmth, lack of affection, lack of love. Fire ends the book because Bertha Mason sets fire in the house before her jump to death. Her fire is the fire of anger and fire of rebellion، التمرد أو الثورة against Rochester's imprisonment of her and his oppression of her. So as we can see that the symbol of fire changes its meaning throughout the book. Sometimes it has a positive connotation and sometimes it has a negative connotation. Let's move to the image of ice and cold. They often appear in association with barren landscapes، مشهد عقيم يعني without plants، or seascapes symbolizing the emotional desolation or loneliness, الوحدة العاطفية, or even this white realms of the architect that Bewick describes in the history of the British birds parallel Jane's physical and spiritual isolation at Gateshead. Gateshead is the place that Jane lived in during the first stage of her life with Aunt Reed or her uncle's widow. The fire is sorry, the image of ice or cold symbolizes her loneliness, وحدتها at that place, and her emotional lack and the death condition in which she lived. If you forget, if you remember with me, the opening of the book starts on in winter's atmosphere on winter's day, which is very cold, and in which Jane expresses her content or satisfaction that she is not going to walk in the ice or cold that day. Another image related to ice or cold dominated the atmosphere of Lowood School, which has the freezing temperatures. For example, the frozen pitchers, الأوعية المجمدة of water that greet the girls each morning. Mirror Jane's sense of psychological exile, المنفى النفسي. After the interrupted wedding to Rochester, Jane describes her state of mind as a Christmas frost, برد في ليالي الكريسماس الباردة had come at midsummer وجالها في وسط الصيف. My hopes were all dead، يعني كل أمنياتي خلاص تلاشت أو انتهت. Finally, at Moore House, in which Jane lived with son John Rivers and his sisters, son John's frigidity and stiffness، الصرامة والقسوة are established through comparisons with ice and cold rock. يعني هو تشبه ان هو صخر بارد. Jane writes by degrees he acquired certain influence over me، يعني بالتدريج هو بقى ليه تأثير عليا that took away my liberty of mind، انتزع حرية تفكيري. I fell under a freezing spell، وكأني وقعت تحت تعويذة أو سحر التجميد، كأنه جمدني. When San John proposes marriage to Jane، لما عرض الجواز على Jane، she concludes that as his curate، الخوري اللي هو منصب في الكنيسة رجل دين، كأنها يعني هتكون شغالة عنده رجل دين مش زوجة. his comrade all would be right، يعني بالنسبة للناس اللي بتشتغل معاه ده أوكي، but as his wife، ولكن إن أنا أكون زوجته at his side always and always restrained، إن أنا أكون مقيدة أو متكتفة and always checked forced to keep the fire of my nature، وإن أنا أبقى مجبرة على كبت النار اللي في طبعي. النار هنا مقصود بيها الباشون، المشاعر، continually low، وإن أنا أخلي المشاعر بتاعتي على طول يعني منخفضة أو مكبوتة. to compel it، وإن أنا أجبر نفسي to burn inwardly، إن أنا أحترق داخليا and never utter a cry، وإن أنا لا أنطق بصرخة واحدة. though the imprisoned flame consumed vital after vital، واللهب اللي جوايا يستنفذ أو يستهلك واحد تلو الآخر. this would be unendurable، ده هيكون شيء لا يمكن تحمله. يبقى في كده بنفهم من الكوتيشن دي إن جين بتقارن نفسها بشخصية سان جون ريفرز اللي هو رجل الدين اللي تقدم لها قبل جوازها على طول من روشستر، إن هو حد بارد زي الصخر بسبب القيود بتاعته الدينية وعقلانيته الزايدة عن اللزوم، وبتشبه نفسها هي بالنار، عشان كده إنها مليئة بالحيوية ومليئة بالطاقة ومليئة بالمشاعر. فعشان كده هيكون الجواز ده مس ماتش، يعني جواز غير ناجح. فعشان كده هي رفضت البروبوزال ده. في عندنا السيمبل of the moonlight، ضوء القمر، which always guides Jane's movement، يعني دايما كانت بتتأثر بيه وبتحب النظر إليه. another important symbol is the symbol of bird. Here it's the symbol of freedom، الحرية. Jane Eyre from the very beginning of the book prefers to liken herself، تشبه نفسها to birds because she pursues her liberty، يعني بتبحث عن الحرية. flying here indicates or implies her liberty. That is why when she selects a book from the library at Gate Shade, she selects a book about birds because she identifies herself with birds in being يعني flying from society in order to search for freedom and fly the constraints or القيود المؤثرة على المجتمع، expressing her rebellion or revolt against those patriarchal social and even religious restrictions. This is the end of our lecture. Thanks for watching and goodbye.